What's going on? Thanks for tuning in. It is, what's today? Thursday?
Thursday, June 24th.
Thursday, June 24th. It's Sunny from 856. I'm here with Eric from Condor Collective. And today we're going to be talking about the ongoing situation in Colombia. So if you have been following the channel, you hopefully saw the interview that I did with Carlos from Raw Brigade, probably late April, early May, where he talked about what was happening early on with the unrest and the protesting that's going on down there. So this video or this interview today is more or less an update on everything that's going on. And Eric has personal ties to what's happening down there. So we've been planning to do something like this for a couple weeks now.
A few weeks.
We were actually going to do it virtually via Zoom. And then I had something come up, so we had to cancel that. But it turned out Eric was coming to Philly. So it worked out perfectly. So we are broadcasting live from an Airbnb in South Philly. And forgot to mute this. We're going to be talking about what's going on, and we'll see where that takes us. So, Eric, you are from Condor Collective?
Yes, I'm a member of Condor Collective. Particularly, I'm a part of the media team. And recently, since the Paro Nacional started 57 days ago, today is day 57 of the Paro Nacional. And during this time, I've also kind of been organizing actions in my community in Milwaukee. But my primary role as a member of Condor is to work on the media team, doing things like what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Have you done a lot of interviews, or have you done a lot of outreach in the U.S. about what's happening?
So thank you for asking. We did our first live stream. Right, we're trying to make a pattern of doing these live streams, connecting with different artists and change makers. And our very first stream was last Friday, with an artist named Azomali. Azomali, living in Los Angeles. Wonderful Colombian American artist. It was a great conversation, and I would like to continue having conversations with people, so we can connect all the dots between our communities, our struggles, and understanding that like our liberation is connected, right? So people should care about Colombia even if they're not personally tied to it, because their liberation is tied to that. Just like Colombians are standing with Palestine in this moment as well, because we understand connections, right? And personally, as an artist and a media worker, I'm like really personally invested in making sure that people in my community of artists are involved and are active in using that platform. So I do want to thank you, bro, specifically. I know, on the mic, we just got started, but I do want to thank you, bro, for everything you've done up until this point and what you're doing right now with us today. It's all love, bro. We appreciate it so much. Thank you, dog. And like, you know, the interview that you did with Carlos from Raw Brigade, I thought that was an amazing interview. I could feel his heart. You know what I mean? I could really feel it. And it means a lot when anyone raises their voice, uses their platform to speak the truth about the situation, whether that's, you know, in Colombia or in their home community, right? And we understand that people in Colombia take a larger risk than folks in the States when they step out, when they show face. We call it mostrando cara. When you show face and you put your name out there, you become a target.
Yeah.
Right? And your loved ones can become targets. So it is dangerous to do this kind of work. It's it's risky. That's a better word. It can be risky, right? So I appreciate everyone who has the courage and who takes that step to be active, right? And I think that artists are especially positioned in a way as communicators, right? As people that are storytellers, truth tellers. We have a responsibility that comes with our power and our skill and experiences. So I'm really looking forward to having this talk with you.
Yeah, when I approached Carlos, I said to him, "There's only so much people want to hear me talk about issues, because I'm not from Colombia and I didn't know much about what was going on."
Mm-hmm.
And Carlos is living in Philly right now, so I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, I would love to have your voice on the channel to talk about it from your personal experience, because I think that is something that's going to resonate with people, and hopefully drive the point home about here's what's going on there.
Yeah.
Here's how it's similar to what's happening here." And like you said with Palestine, there's a reason why people are standing side by side worldwide right now, and it's because we're able to draw these parallels between various struggles across borders, and I think that is a very powerful thing. And so, Carlos had said, we keep referencing this interview. If you haven't seen it, it's called On Colombia. Check it out. It's on 856 YouTube, on the IGTV. It's pretty short, but it's very informative. And you can, like you said, Carlos is so emotional during it. You can feel what he's saying. And what he said to me before we started recording was that he felt like it was his obligation to come on and do it, because he can't be at home and stand with his people and be with them. So the next best thing is to use his voice and to try to educate people. And based on the feedback that we got on the video, there were plenty of people who were saying that what he said, connected with them, and they made them, stop and actually do some research into what's going on. So can you tell us a little bit about both your personal connection to Colombia and also, since that video went up, what has changed with the situation?
Definitely, thank you. So my personal connection comes through my family. My mother immigrated to the United States as a young person, and most of my family on her side is still in Colombia, right? So I have a lot of family members in the country, and I care about their safety, right? And aside from my family specifically, I care about my people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to blood connected to folks to care about their well-being, right? And I want to make sure that, like, in our motherland, that we have a society where people can, like, live, right, and have dignity and safety and health, right? And when they're not being, like, oppressed under the thumb of the government and over the U.S. empire, right? We have, like, a horrible economic situation there, like a crisis of poverty, right, of inequality.
And that's not new.
And
right?
that's not new at all, exactly. And that and what we see with this paro nacional means a national strike. If you don't know, I'll be saying paro nacional. Right. So with the paro nacional, some people outside of Colombia might be looking in and saying, what is going on right now? Why all of a sudden is it going on, right? Why is it all of a sudden happening? I hear from people say, I thought the peace process was going well. I thought things were actually improving in Colombia. But that's kind of just the narrative that people hear outside. What you don't hear as much is, like, the crippling inequality, systemic violence, assassinations of social and political leaders, from líderes sociales. We were talking a little bit before about what has happened in the previous presidencies of the same political party, Centro Democrático, which is neither center or democratic, right? They call it Centro Democrático, but it's a fascist, right? So this fascist party has been in power for several presidencies consecutively, and in that time, there's been over 6,400 disappeared, right, of social leaders, and the phenomenon known as the falsos positivos, or false positives. I encourage everyone to take time to look into the stories of the falsos positivos, false positives, and really understand that, right? Because it'll help you understand the context going into it, right? So the paro nacional was sparked by the reforma tributaria, a proposed tax reform. It was going to squeeze tax revenue from Colombia's hardest working people, right? And
this was back in April, right?
Correct. Yeah. In the earlier part of April, the paro nacional started April 28th. So the strike was a response to the reforma tributaria, going to squeeze tax revenue from Colombia's hardest working people, making it harder to, like, buy basic goods like, right, or gasoline, right? Meanwhile, there's, like, countries rife with corruption, have upper class that is pocketing money, right? And they want to squeeze that out of working. So people say, "Ya basta, enough." And they rose up, right? And again, it's not new. Colombia's been organized and active for a long time. And before, there have been other national strikes. There's been, for example, a major farmer strike that was big. And the mobilization of people in the streets across the country is also not new, right? Particularly, there's been a lot of action around police brutality as a result of these assassinations, right, that we see. And even outside of the context of the falsos positivos, there's always been cops killing people in the streets, right? And always all this injustice that people have been responding, right? So what we see now, it was almost like what they say, the last straw, right? It was like enough, especially considering we're in the context of a pandemic, right? So it's already an economic crisis, and then a health crisis. And then, the health crisis makes the economic situation worse. And the government's like, okay, cool, we're going to take the last of what you got. You said, no, it's not happening, right? So what we saw was a mobilization across almost all social sectors to participate in this national strike. So that includes, for example, industrial workers and union movement, rural sectors and farmers, right? All of Colombia's indigenous nations and movements, right? The Afro-Colombian communities. Like for example, when we support RedCondor, we support an organization, Buenaventura, primarily Afro-Colombian community. Buenaventura resiste, like Buenaventura, they've been active long before the Paro Nacional, and they continued in this moment, right? Students, journalists, human rights defenders, observers, the artists, right? Drummers, everyone has kind of been mobilized to participate in this national strike on a countrywide level across all major cities, right? And it's been sustained for 7 days
Wow.
straight, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to like even think about that. And like there's been to get that far, there's been a lot of casualties, right? Very early on, Carlos mentions this, right?
The numbers were staggering.
Exactly.
In terms of beatings, deaths, sexual assault by police, disappearances. I can imagine. I can't even imagine the numbers now since then.
Yeah, it's shocking, honestly, and I do think it can be difficult for a lot of people in the United States to really wrap their heads around the scale and the intensity of this violence. Not to say that Americans are not used to violence. State violence is very real, right? But this is something that is like the scale of it and the intensity is so wild. Like for example, right? Since Carlos did the interview, right? The most updated numbers that I've seen, and I will give a little asterisk disclaimer, right? The numbers are always changing, so this is a ballpark, right? But the most recent numbers that I've been seeing, reporting over 80 confirmed dead, right? Over 1,000 confirmed disappeared, and I should stop right there because disappearances is not as common in the United States either, right? So when we say someone's disappeared, they've been detained and no one knows where they are. And a lot of times, if they've been disappeared for more than a few days, it's likely that the person has been killed, right? Been murdered, right? So we talk about the 80 confirmed deaths, but there's also this major number of disappeared, and a lot of disappeared have been popping up. Their bodies have been popping up, dismembered, decapitated, floating in rivers, right?
People are just finding limbs and body parts just right throughout the city.
They're being left by the people who are committing the violence. They're being left as a sign of like, this is what's going to happen if you're acting. Take your head, literally.
And are they strategically placing them in places
so people see it?
So they see it.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So, so since you had the interview, the violence has continued to escalate. Right? Obviously, there was that initial push of like crazy state repression when the Paro Nacional started, and it had the effect of kind of mobilizing more people to participate, right, in response to the violence. The violence never stopped, right? It continued escalating, and it began to take new forms as well. So some of them, earlier on, we saw a lot of incidents of cops shooting people in the eye, and a lot of people losing sight or losing an eyeball. And there was even like conservative politicians that were like, yo, stop crying and complaining over just the eye. So you're making a big deal. Oh, it's you just lost an eye, right? And that's it's a totally messed up perspective, right? And that has continued. And there's also newer methods of what we've been seeing. Like I said earlier, the dismemberment of people. It wasn't something we saw as much in the beginning. It was more death by gun bullets, right? The either cops or right-wing paramilitares or just like citizens that are giving themselves the authority to murder protesters because the cops are letting them do it, right in front of the cops. Now there's a lot more of people who are disappeared showing up, bodies floating in the rivers, heads showing up on. One thing that I think is important to mention is that businesses like the Éxito grocery store chain have been used by the Colombian police as ad hoc detention centers and torture centers. And then in the aftermath, a lot of people's body parts are being found nearby, or there's like blood in the front of the street of the Éxitos, right? So it's important to understand that this conflict is not just the state versus the people, it's the ruling class, the entire ruling class, all of its mechanisms, above ground and underground, formal and informal. against the people, right? And the movement is not an armed movement. The Paro Nacional is not armed. It's a peaceful movement. You know what I mean? And it's being violently repressed. Um, Bodies piling up, right? Um, Thousands of people being injured, thousands of like unlawful arrest and detention, right? Dozens of cases of reported sexual violence and rape committed by police officers against detainees, right? These are crimes against humanity, right? They're international violations of international law, right? Like human rights is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like governments sign up to respect human rights, and when they violate these laws, they should be held accountable, right? Um, so what Red Condor is about in supporting the situation in the Paro Nacional, supporting the people on the front lines, we want to make sure that people in like English speaking communities are educated on the situation, they're informed, and that they feel like they know what to do, right? Because so many of us, this is so real in the diaspora, so many of us see this stuff on screens, on TV or phones, and then we feel like, what can I do? Right?
Yeah, that was a lot of questions I got from viewers after the interview with Carlos was, what can I do? What are things that we can do to help? So what would you recommend that the average person, because I would say that the vast majority of people who watch this will probably be 18 to 30 some years old in the US,
Yeah.
based on my demographic of people who come to Hate 56.
Yeah.
So what would you say that the average person here in the States could do to help show solidarity?
Thank you for asking. I would say the very first step is just like get informed and get in touch with the situation so that you have a good idea, because it is complicated and there's a lot of history involved, and it's a lot of stuff that you'll never learn in like a US school system, right? So it's
I mean, the U.S. school system doesn't even teach about U.S. history. So.
Exactly.
So you're right.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're not going to talk about their empire, right? So yeah, first step, just be informed. Second step, make sure you're informing others. And that's why first you got to inform yourself in order to inform others, so you get the right info out, right? But then the next step is mobilize in your local community, however that works for you. Mobilize your local community to put pressure on any elected officials. Stop supporting the Colombian. Because like the Colombian government is the U.S. government's greatest ally and they use Colombia as a staging ground for counter-revolutionary interventions all over the continent. Right? It's very problematic, like the way the U.S. is using Colombia and the way the ruling class allows them to do it and how they benefit, right? So like, important for people to understand that the U.S. is very much involved in this, very much responsible, right? So
much like in Israel,
exactly,
the attacks on the Palestinian people.
Exactly, right? So like, we don't want people to ever feel like they can't do anything, because like your tax dollars are buying bullets and helicopters and rifles that are killing our people, right? So you can influence not just your politicians, but anyone in your community to mobilize and take action and be involved, right? Everyone kind of has their own capacity, their own lane. So I would just say, find that for yourself. What are you able to do? Who are you able to speak with? But in general, the idea is that we're pushing for an end to U.S. military aid Colombia and some sort of legal accountability. A lot of people are talking about the Leahy law. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Leay, which is a law around U.S. providing support for countries doing human rights violations. Right. So hold your elected officials accountable for supporting this massacre. Right. So right here in the States, we're able to do that, but we're also able to send material aid to Colombia. Right? That's a huge part of what Red Condor does and what we're about, right? Is taking our resources, global north, right? Whether, a lot of us get paid in dollars, right? And those dollars, when you send those dollars to Colombia, the value multiplies, right? And a lot of people, unless you have a family situation or you're an immigrant, you might not have that same conception around currency and value in different countries. But like every dollar counts for and people can do a lot with it. When you make a donation, can do a lot, right? In Red Condor, we're transparent about our donation practices because we know that's like a big responsibility. When people give you their money, they're giving you their time and energy of their life worked,
Right.
right? And they want it to be in the hands of people on the front line. That's what we're about, right? Is we take that money graciously and respectfully, and we make sure it gets in the right hands, on the front lines, on the grassroots, on the ground, to organizations that are trusted and that we're in contact with, right? And then those same organizations then send us photos and videos documenting what they did with that money, and then we share that so people can see. Make a $20 donation that can really change the game. That can provide some necessary supplies, whether that's like first aid kit, helmet, right, paint. You know what I mean? There's so many things that we can do to support the people on the ground just by donating, just by being in touch with this, and by showing love, and by applying pressure. You know, so I don't want people to ever feel like they can't support the Paro Nacional or any cause in other countries, right? Just because they're in the United States, Canada, UK, wherever people are, right? There's always a way to get involved, and we all have our own special set of skills, tools, and experience to the table.
Yeah, and that's what Carlos says in the interview. I keep coming back to what Carlos said, but he really laid it out very clearly. He says everywhere there are Colombians, people are rising up. So he meant people in the diaspora. So Colombians here in the U.S. are rising up. So there are, wherever you live, there are Colombians in your community. So I think it's important to build bridges with them and find out what you can do. And there's a link tree in the description of this video that links to the Red Condor, all the info. So I'm assuming there's a donation link in there, other resources as well. Going back to something that we talked about before we went live was the difference between Venezuela and Colombia in terms of how the U.S. treats it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so little disclaimer, I did grow up in Caracas, Venezuela. I lived there 2 different times in my life for about a total of like 9 years as a kid. So I saw a lot of what was going on in Caracas, and I saw a lot about the way that people in the United States talk to countries, Colombia, Venezuela, that are right next to each other, but are very different, have very different governments. Culturally, we have a lot in common. And we used to be one country of El Gran Colombia, right? With other countries at one point in time. But nowadays, Colombia and Venezuela, 2 neighboring countries, very different governments, right? Very different, let's say, international roles, priorities. And then what we see is Venezuela gets the iron fist, and Colombia gets the kitty gloves, gets a little slap on the wrist.
From the U.S., you're
From
saying?
the U.S.,
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, the U.S., who likes to play this role of the global bully, the global police officer, right? We see, these massive human rights violations in Colombia. Thousands of people murdered by the state and non-state actors, and we see no accountability. And again, Colombia is a narco state, right? No accountability for this role of the ruling class in the global drug trade. No accountability for crimes against humanity, the massacres, the police brutality, right? Obviously, not just in this moment. Well, meanwhile, Venezuela, any opportunity the U.S. has, they crack down, right? And they even try to invade from Colombia. Marco Rubio tried to stage an invasion. It's crazy to even say that. Marco Rubio, what? Tried to stage an invasion of Venezuela through the Colombian border, right? And a lot of times, these kind of like tensions on the border lead to people dying. This is military conflict. It's super real, right? So it's not okay to be fermenting this conflict between these 2 neighboring countries, which are like, it's like a brotherhood, a Latin American brotherhood, cultures, right? Our shared history. And the United States meddles, just like it does all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And ferments this conflict, which costs people's lives, right? So that's why we say U.S. out of Colombia, U.S. out of Venezuela, no trade embargoes, right? Try not to cuss.
You can cuss.
But U.S. needs to get up out of there and like let people live, let people run their own countries without putting their hands in, without like sending in like their goons to murder people and do coups, right?
Right.
Without funding right-wing death squads, which are terrorist groups, right? The U.S. sponsors terrorism. I know, big surprise, right? The U.S. sponsors terrorist organizations
Across the world.
all over the world,
Yeah.
and in Colombia
Throughout history, yeah.
Yes, and like so we see the stark contrast between the two countries, and the reason why is the U.S. Colombia government relationship, super tight, close allies. The United States, jumps. Colombian government says how high. The United States wants to put their troops in the ground. They're like, cool, send your troops over. What do the troops do? In the country, right? So there's a long history of this U.S.-Colombia relationship. And I encourage everyone to look into Plan Colombia. It'll help you understand the situation a little better. Bill passed under Clinton administration. Biden was a big proponent of it. Plan Colombia is a horrible policy, horrible legislation, which really ramped up the level of U.S. intervention in Colombia, which we still see today. So even though the Paro Nacional is this big current moment, there's all of this history that leads up to it that people should look into to get a better understanding of how we got here. Because it's not all of a sudden, right? Like I said, it was kind of like more so the last.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? That's a lot of great points. I'm just seeing people in the chat are saying great analysis. So yeah, I think you've done a really good job just laying it out. And I think one thing that I wanted to ask is, so you've been involved in this work for quite a while, and my perception, just being someone involved in the States, that there's been sort of an awakening here with respect to like Black Lives Matter, for example. More and more people are, becoming aware and actually engaging and taking a stand on this issue. So how do you see the relationship between what's going on here in terms of, like, because you said earlier, there's a, across all sectors, there's people been rising up. So can you speak a little bit, because you've been living in the States for quite a while, right? So what kind of parallels do you see with the BLM movement here with what's going on there? Obviously, they're two separate things, but they're also very much so connected.
Thank you for asking. So I think one of the big things to like put out there first is, just like in the United States, Afro-Colombianos and indigenous Colombianos and Colombianas face the violence first, and they face it the hardest, right? That's in any settler colonial states, right? Colombia, United States, you could list it all, right? The Afro-Colombian community and all the indigenous nations of Colombia are facing the heaviest brunt of this state violence and non-state actor violence, right? So the parallels are just like right there, right? We see Afro-Colombian communities in struggle long before the Paro Nacional, and really stepping up in this moment and like being an example of struggle. Like, for example, Buenaventura, the community I was talking about earlier, the Afro-Colombian community there, they did a civic strike and shut down the port. The port city, a lot of Colombian commodities go through that port, but the city faces stark inequality, serious poverty, right? And the people that work that port don't benefit from those commodities they were going through. They shut it down, right? So we see like the Afro-Colombian community is like one of the people leading the struggle, right? And the indigenous community, some of the people leading the struggle, right? And their action. And in the United States, we see a similar phenomenon of people, as they should, taking the leadership of Black community organizers, following their lead, listening to their analysis, and taking it seriously, right? And really like, taking it to heart and following suit. So both of these movements, whether it's in Colombia and the United States, it's against state violence, right? It's the people, the community rising up and saying, ya basta, we are not going to let you kill us anymore, right? And we see that, I see it in Milwaukee, yep. Right? I'm connected to, shout out to the People's Revolution in Milwaukee. They marched every day for more than a year straight, and they're still marching, right? I love the people. And they supported our march for Colombia, right? So people who are on the ground, they immediately understand that connection. They know cops killing y'all, cops killing us. fuck that, period.
Yeah,
We're going to
'cause
get together.
Even here at Black Lives Matter rallies in Philly, and I'm sure in other cities, I will see signs and also people speaking, with the microphone about things that are happening in Colombia, things that are happening in Palestine. So people are becoming aware. I mean, not becoming. People are aware of the connections across borders and how these struggles are all interconnected in many ways. And so, like, fighting for none of us are free until we're all free.
Exactly.
That's the line that you hear at a lot of these rallies, and I think that's fundamentally true.
Yeah.
No one's free if someone somewhere else is being oppressed. So I think
and one thing that I like to say a lot is that, like, the only way we'll come out of this is together. Where none of our communities are going to come out of the situation alone, right? Obviously, all of our communities are powerful independently. We have capacity, we have the ganas, will, but how we're really going to win is together. That's what it takes, right? That's the mass that we need, this power that we need. It's going to come from bridging the gap between all of our communities, all of our struggle, and a commitment to collective liberation, which requires this systemic change, because we're not going to have collective liberation through some reform, right? So what I've seen in my community in Milwaukee is people immediately connecting the dots in their head. The second they kind of wrap their they get informed and like, oh yeah, this is in the same struggle. You know what I mean? Different cops, same struggle. Different country, same struggle. And it's like this global American empire and this global ruling class of capitalist industry that are really behind a lot of these. And you can connect the dots by just looking at, like, the weapons, right? Some of the weapons in Colombia come from the United States and they come from Israel, right? Canada and UK are also very involved in providing this, like, financial support for the state and for the terrorist groups that are repressing Colombian people, right? So, like, it's easy to connect the dots because there's this material connection.
right.
You can look at a tear gas canister. This was famous a few years ago when Ferguson was starting, right? You can look at a tear gas canister used on the streets in the United States. Same company making the tear gas in Colombia, in Palestine. Right?
And that's the thing. When people were getting tear gassed in Ferguson, Palestinians were on Twitter saying, "Oh, you should flush your eyes using X, Y, and Z." So it was amazing to see that solidarity coming across the ocean, saying like, "Oh, we see that you're being tear gassed. Here's how we deal with it when IDF is tear gassing us in Gaza."
Yeah, and that's the power of the people. Is when people come together and show love and link arms in struggle. That's when we can win, right? And that's what I've been seeing in my local community in Milwaukee. Since this has started, the Paro Nacional, we did a Colombia Solidarity rally in March. Support of lots of community organizations, lots of different folks in the community all came together to march and show solidarity with the Colombian people. Again, that was in part with the support of the People's Revolution in Milwaukee, the biggest, most organized, most experienced police brutality organization fighting against police brutality. I wouldn't have done it without them. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have wanted to do it. So we know that like we can't accomplish things on our own, especially like Colombians. We're a small community. Like, we're straight up, we're a smaller community, right? Especially in Milwaukee, very small compared to Chicago and New York. So it's like, I need the Mexicans with me. I need my Palestinians with me. You know what I mean? I need the African American community with me, because like, we can't do it alone. None of us can do it alone. And the love is always reciprocal, right? And that's why after the march, we did a solidarity cultural event of Colombia and Palestine, using cultural expression as a political tool, right? And as a platform to build relationships from our community so we can organize together. So like, to me, that's super important. We all come together, right? Even you and I right here sitting down, we represent different communities, right? Yeah. And we care about the same stuff.
But we met through hardcore.
Exactly. I don't know.
I'm sure people are watching, like, what are these dudes talking about? Like, we know each other from hardcore shows. I forget what the first one we met at. We probably
it was Los Crudos.
Los Crudos, yeah, in Chicago, yeah. Was it the one in? I've seen them in Chicago like 4 times.
I bet.
Was that the indoor soccer stadium? No,
it wasn't. I wish. That's Chi-Town football. It was in like the basement of a bar.
That was that one. Yeah, they did 2 shows that day with the MK Ultra, right?
They did. Yeah. And I drove for the later show that night. Yeah. With one of my best friends from Milwaukee. Yeah. We just drove to the show and back.
Yeah. So we connected there, and then I ran into Eric randomly in Japan. So when I was in Japan with Jesus Piece, I decided to go to a random show that Jesus Piece wasn't playing. I think it was Friendship. And so I was in there by myself. I mean, people from Jesus Peace were with me, and we were standing there, and I was like, I think you came up to me, and I was like, wait, what the fuck are you doing in Japan of all places? But that's the beauty of hardcore. You can be anywhere, and you're gonna run into someone that you ran into at a show across the world. And so I want to come back and talk about like, what is the role of the hardcore community in all of this?
Yes.
Because, early on in the Black Lives Matter uprisings last year, I saw a lot of conversations happening in the hardcore world about, bands using the platform to talk about it. But after that initial surge, it kind of went away. And, after Carlos's video went up, I got a lot of messages from the hardcore community in Colombia, and also, the Colombian diaspora, people all over saying like, thank you for, putting Carlos on to talk about our people struggle. Yeah. So what do you think, like, what is the role of hardcore in all of this? Because like I got into hardcore because of the political message, or at least the opportunity for there to be a political message. And in some ways that has fallen to the wayside over the years, but also in recent history, there's been a resurgence of it. So how do you feel like, what do you feel when you think about like hardcore and what has been done and what can be done, specifically with what's happening in Colombia?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I think, and I'm glad you mentioned that for folks to know. That is how we got connected. That's how I know about Hey 5-6, right? Because I just love what you do. I love the work. You know what I mean? I see it and I appreciate it and I love it. And your work was brought to the attention of my organization because of your interview with Carlos. So like, you've created this platform through your passion for hardcore, right? And heavy music in general, and DIY. You built up this platform over the years of hard work, and then you use that platform that you built to highlight social justice issues, right? Even with the pushback that you got, right? And like, that's so powerful, bro. That's so like important for you to be doing what you do and to doing that and follow your heart and your gut about what moves you want to make. Because hardcore kind of gives us like a sense of community, a sense of shared cultural experience, right? And that is like that itself is not a neutral thing. It can be used in a lot of ways.
It's a very powerful thing.
Exactly.
You go to another, again, when I was in Japan, seeing people in Japan going crazy for Jesus Peace and Marauder. I mean, that is a very material demonstration of like cultural bridging. You know what I mean? I think that the reason that I use Hate 5-6 as a vehicle for putting this information out there is because I really feel like there is that capacity there to get people to take that energy that they feel at a show to sing along to a band from a different country, to use that same energy to draw parallels with, or to use that same fire and fury to go fight for their neighbor's community. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so like, for me, I get pushback about why do you mix the politics and the music, but it's about culture jamming, because we're living in a time right now where you can just, if you don't want to learn about something or hear something, you just mute it, you just block it. We're able to build these silos and not have any sort of like have any exposure to anything outside that silo.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's paramount to like, people come to the channel for entertainment, but to subvert that expectation and give them a dose of, give them a fucking shotgun blast of truth about what's going on in this country or that country. Because it's important, and some people don't think it's important, but you have connections to Colombia. You're from the hardcore scene. People in the scene, this music scene that you're so integrated within, there are people who have family in other countries who are struggling. So to say that these issues don't matter to hardcore, they should be kept separate, it is completely disregarding the lived experience of your peers. And hardcore is about the community. And in order to really embrace that, you need to fucking lift off the blinders and be willing to wrestle with that and really come to grips with like, oh yeah, shit might be good where I live, but what's going on over there, there's something there that needs to be fixed. So that's how I feel about it. And like, even when I get trolls, like, trolls boost engagement, and the name of the game is to boost engagement. Like you said, you need to inform yourself before you can inform others. And so the mission objective for everything I do is to get it out there, whether it's like get this new band out there, reach a new audience, or like get this interview with me and you or Carlos, get it out there and let people wrestle with it. And if that means dealing with trolls, again, the trolls are fueling the algorithm to get more eyes on it. And that's what it is. It all comes down to being an information war and trying to arm people with as much information as possible so that when they go out there and they are engaging with someone who's denying the truth, they can come counteract with them, being like, hey, what you just said isn't actually true. People are actually just disappearing in Colombia. People are actually being, assaulted and that. So it is hugely important to put information out there and just hope that people actually engage with it and do something with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, brother. And you're right. What you're saying here about like a lot of people just straight up denying the facts about the situation. It's so important that really solidifies. And I dealt with that face to face with people. My face saying like, oh, there's not people dying. Like, you're gonna tell me these 80 people are not, like, you know what I mean? They're all making it up. No way, And we got the names. That's the thing. It's like, that's the information. Like, we have a name for every person. Every name.
It's a family. Yeah.
It's a community. It's this whole network around that person. That one death ripples throughout the whole community.
And even in Palestine with the recent airstrikes, they took out. There was that one airstrike that took out several generations of a single family in one home. There was like 4 generations or something, like 14 people died. And there's names and histories and like generational like trauma there, to be able to for that to happen. And so for people to deny things like that is just, it's one, revisionist, and also allows this to happen. It enables this to continue.
Which is why the narrative is so popular, because the ruling class is so invested in perpetuating this unjust system, and they will build this system off of our bodies, right? Off of our graves. They don't care about any of our lives. They will use our lives as a stepping stone to maintain the status quo, right? And it's an intimidating situation, like the depth of the situation, right? There's no low that is too low for the ruling class to take when it comes to maintaining their power and their wealth, right? And this petty idea of this material wealth that they kill people over, right?
And the story is the same everywhere. They will do anything to protect capital and protect property, even if it means, countless death.
So that kind of shows you how important the role of the cultural worker is. Because the cultural worker is a communicator, is a storyteller, truth teller, right? And is a change maker. And cultural workers, I use this term, you can say you're an artist, you can phrase it so many ways, right? Because I'm a filmmaker, but I also make music and photographer. I'm interested in a lot of art forms, right? And I think most people are. I think most people who are creative never just do one thing, right? So like, it's so important for whoever you are, whatever your skill is, take those skills, take that experience, and use it for your community. Use it for the people. Use it for, like, save a life if you can. Try, right? Whatever your platform is, whatever your format is. I've seen so many different people all contribute in the movement. They're small piece, and it's beautiful. What everyone, it seems insignificant individually, but when we all come together and we bring that small piece, that's power.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think that's what deters people from joining a movement, is because they see this fucking mountain. Like, I can't move this mountain. But like Mindset said, we can move mountains one rock at a time. And it sounds like a mundane thing, but it's true. Like, find whatever it is that you're good at and commit that skill to the movement. If you're good at, like, making flyers, help out with making effective artwork or posters, because that's how art is an effective way to get people to think about things differently. Like, I was recently asked about, like, political art. And I made the argument that memes are actually the most effective form of art right now, because people consume it, they share it, they think it's funny, but there's always a subtle, and maybe not so subtle, tinge of political commentary there.
Yes.
But that shit gets disseminated, gets shared around, and you're spreading that idea around through, technically, and that's art. It's a vector through which people are passing information. Yeah. So I think that if people have a skill, like, find a way to apply that skill, because I think people they think that they are not malleable, or they don't think they have the flexibility to apply that skill somewhere, but you can. Like, I have a fucking video camera. I was like, I'll just found a way to use the video camera to amplify other voices. But, if you run sound and there's a local protest happening, make your PA available and help run sound. Like, there's so many things that you can do at a small scale that actually helps other people in terms of like getting the word out or helping elevate their voices in a certain way. So I think that people in hardcore are very creative. Like, we can be creative if we actually apply ourselves. But I think that if you feel like there's nothing you can do, you're lying to yourself and you're selling yourself short. And that's part of the system designed that way to make you think that you don't have a voice and you don't have the capacity to actually do anything. And the truth is that you actually do. And they distract you by squeezing you in terms of, you know, forcing poverty on you and forcing you to worry about the next paycheck to prevent you from realizing that you can actually be more proactive in your community and find ways of engaging in a very like concrete, material way.
Yeah, and this sense of like alienation and isolation that you're talking about that we experience under capitalism, you know, it squashes the human spirit, and it squashes our human potential for a new future, right? And that is kind of like what I see part is like the role of the artist, you know, like to not use art as a mirror, but rather as a hammer, right? Instead of just reflecting reality, and build reality with our art, right? And that doesn't mean the art is in itself transformation, but it's a piece of that process, right? It gives people ideas, it helps people understand things better, and it helps you feel. I think even the feeling to me is the most important thing. Like, the feeling goes above facts and figures and statistics and like reality. The feeling is like this immediate direct connection with someone who has a completely different experience as yours, through headphones, through a screen, whatever the method is. But it not completely puts you in their shoes, but you feel that communication that they're putting out to you. You feel that energy. Like I was saying about Carlos, you know, like the interview was so powerful.
You felt it.
I felt it. I was saying I felt it, yo, and I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I could tell he's going through it. He knows what's going on. Right? And any artist, regardless of your art form, you're putting something out from your heart and sharing that with the world, and you're reaching out to other people's hearts. You know what I mean? And like, you never know the transformation you can make. Like, I do want to shout out again Azomali in Los Angeles. You know, MC, Afro-Indigenous MC, originally from New York, went to LA. We talked last week. And the reason why I wanted to talk with him about the issue is because his work had impacted, right? It was something like, I lost a lot of family in Colombia recently. And his work specifically helped me process that, helped me deal with that, helped me feel more in touch and connected with my culture, which then that gives me the fuel to fight. You know what I mean? If I feel like weak and powerless and like depressed, and like I don't have the fuel to get up out of bed and do the stuff I need to do, right? So like, we should never diminish the role of the artist, because like, we're fueling the fire, right? And a lot of times is there stuff that happens behind the scenes, stuff you might not see, right? Everyone knows about like the banner. You see the banners, the signs, you see the big graphic arts, right? But there's so much that artists are doing behind the scenes that really just gives people this power, that feel the power, the courage, step out and do something, right? And that can take a lot of forms, right? And again, like circling back to hardcore, right? I never thought the politics was separate. You know, it was never a thing of like, why are you mixing them? It's already there. Right. Like, the medium is the message, right? And hardcore itself is very political from its inception, right? This DIY ethos from punk rock that we also see in pop is like a revolutionary spirit, right?
Even at a show, you see that the band and the audience, or the line blurs there. Exactly. Obviously, there's a stage, but people jump on the stage, they jump. Like, the line is so, there's no line there. And I think that is a very political thing. And you're right, like, you know, art seeps into every aspect of our lives. And again, when I'm at a show and I see people screaming along and punching their fucking best friend in the face to a song, it means that there's something about that song that's resonating them to elicit this visceral reaction, this physical reaction. And there has to be something there. That means that there's something going on there that's allowing people to connect to get to that point. Yeah. And people can probably hear that honking. Yeah, that's okay. But you see that when Jesus Peace plays Oppressor, You know, it's Aaron's. I mean, Aaron's a black man living in America, and you see all kinds of people screaming those lyrics back at him. And I remember seeing a sign at a BLM rally. It wasn't in Philly. It was a picture that someone had taken, and it was an incendiary lyric.
Yeah,
incendiary. One of their songs. The lyrics were on the sign they were holding.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think that art does push people in little ways, sometimes more explicitly through like a mosh pit or whatever, screaming the words back at you, or it could influence you in terms of like, you know what, I'm going to this rally and like, yeah, that line from that song really resonates with me, and I think that convey like art, it's a way of encapsulating a feeling in a very, you know, tangible way, and I think that you're right. It's art is it's so important right now.
Yeah.
With getting people aware and getting people to stay engaged, want to actually like step out of their comfort zone and do something.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps you like take a very complicated idea and just refine it into something that can be digested and understood, right? A symbol, right? I mean, there's so many examples of this, whether it's like lyrics or graphic design, but it really takes something that's like hard to grapple with, and it gives you a connection to it. And you're like, okay, I feel this. You know, you see the graphics of the Primera Línea, the frontline fighters with the shields, right? You see the images. You see the Rebel Alliance symbol from Star Wars, right, on the streets. Yeah. And it's because it's the resistance against Empire, right? It's a visual metaphor. It helps you understand and connect to things. And one thing I think is always interesting, when we consume art to a degree, we're projecting our own lives on that art and on the artist, right? And it's almost like they wrote this for me, or like this is my story, this is my song, and it just like it helps us understand ourselves better and understand our world 100%, better. Yeah. So it's like you need the people who are putting out these messages, who are putting out the graphics, the videos, the photos, the graffiti, the drums in the street. Like I'm a member of a protest drum line in Milwaukee that I co-founded. Right? And that's my art that I bring to the movement, right? The drums, the beat, the rhythm, the energy. And you can tell the difference when it's like really popping. And it's the power of our art, right? To elevate, to amplify, to expand, to connect. It's such a powerful tool. It should never be diminished. And it should also be understood that it's not a neutral tool. It can be used against us. And in this context that we're talking about, it should be used for the movement, like in connection to the movement. Like I had a conversation with the artist in Milwaukee recently. What can I do? I want to use my art movement. I want to use my art as a voice for the movement. And I have to tell him, first you got to be in the movement.
Right.
You got to get in the streets, or you got to get connected to folks. Whatever that means to you, you need to be in touch with what's going on before you use your art like for that. You got to be a part of it, right? You got to understand what's going on. But once you're a part of it, people welcome that and they want more artists. They want to see that engagement. They want to see stuff that they can share with people and put it out there that helps people understand. So it's very powerful, but it also doesn't stand on its own. There needs to be something around it, right? Like your platform, right? It's like you create a context for this art. And even like something as simple as like your logo, it tells you off rip, this is like some for the people shit, right? So it's about the framing is super important. The implementation, the distribution, all these things are super important, right? Why like DIY music has this revolutionary potential and has this power to it. Whether it's punk rock or hip hop has the same spirit.
Same thing, yep.
Right? And it's super important to me. There's power there and we should use it, right? Because we need as much power as we can.
I agree. We're coming up on the 1 hour mark. Is there anything else, any of the final things you wanted to address to let the people know? Because again, I think that what happens in the U.S. is there's always a uptick in surge in interest, and then it just like a flash in the pan, it just dissipates. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that for a lot of people, they thought the situation was over because they haven't heard anything. So. Yeah. Are there any like parting words you want to let people know about how to stay engaged, or just to leave with them to wrestle with?
Yes. I would say one of the first things, just like you mentioned, just because we don't see it on our social media feeds doesn't mean it stopped. And in fact, these social media corporations we use their platform to organize and to do our work, but they're like, they're aligned with the ruling class, right? They're members of the CEOs and everything, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that. They're members of the ruling class, and they're invested in us not doing our work, right? So they undermine our work. On Instagram, for example, which is why one reason we're not on Instagram Live for the RedCondors is because we've been kicked off of Instagram Live, right? Our platform for political work. They say we're violating community guidelines, right? But what are we doing, right? Raising funds, feed people, get hard.
It was the fundraising that.
I don't think so. They never give us an explicit example, but they say we were violating community guidelines, right? So it's not just Instagram though. Like all of these platforms, it's important to remember it's not a neutral thing, right? And we use it for what we can get out of it, but it can't be the only places we organize.
100%.
So I would encourage all of our viewers, I'm gonna look right in the camera, get involved with your local community, whatever that means to you, right? So like if you're Colombian, link up with the Colombians. Also link up with everyone else, right? No matter what community you're from, you got to be on the ground and in touch. And that doesn't mean you have to be marching, right? Marching isn't
it's
the
not
only thing, and it's not for everyone. There's so many ways to be involved, but get in touch with people. Don't limit it to the screen. This is important. It does stuff, but like be in relations with each other and in your community as like your first step of organizing, and don't be afraid. Make those connections to other people's struggles. It's okay to make mistakes in the process. But don't be afraid, because this violence that we see against social leaders, right? They're spreading terror through this violence to silence us.
And prevent people from getting involved.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we're silent and we stop getting people involved, then they're winning, right? And we're not having that. We're winning, right? We're out here to win for our people worldwide because we're here for justice, for humanity, for dignity, for life. Right? So don't be afraid. Connect with your community. Bridge those gaps. Join an organization if you can. Make sure you're providing material aid to people in the mother countries, right? And stay informed, right? There's so many, and I've said this before, there's so many things you can do, but figure out what I would encourage people, figure out what your skill set is. Figure out what your experiences lead you to do and do that. An example for me is in like the last year, I stopped bringing my cameras to protests because I realized I didn't have to be the person with the camera. There's tons of people now. This changed over the years, right? There's so many people doing the media work now. I'm like, great. I feel great knowing that other people are doing that. Then what can I do instead? And I picked up the marching drum because I have that background as a high school drumline player, right? I played in a ska band with members of my marching band in high school. Right? So my experiences in high school, I carry those on till today, and then we do the drumline. Yeah. Right? And that's just like one thing that is connected to my personal experiences and skills. So that's what I encourage people to do. Find out what your thing is, right? What do you bring to the table? Bring that to the table.
And the other point is, like, no one has all the answers from the beginning. You got to start somewhere. You just need to go out there and start building those bridges, start figuring out what is your place, what can you learn about, and go from there. It's a process.
Yes.
And I think people feel like, oh, I've been involved in this for a week, a month, 6 months, hasn't gotten better, or I'm not, feel like I'm ineffective. But you being there is effective. And you taking those steps is effective because, again, the system and capitalism, they are all by design intended to prevent you from taking those steps. So by you taking those steps is you rejecting those systems that are designed to prevent you from doing so. So I think that just going out there and realizing that this is a long-term thing that you must be a part of is so important to realize, because otherwise there's a thing called compassion fatigue, or people get fatigued by being in the movement because they feel like it's not going anywhere, or they're not contributing anything, but it's not true. And I think it's always about like having a sense of what is the end goal, but like what little steps can I take to get? What little steps can I do to up my involvement or to be more resourceful So that's going to wrap it up. Again, there's a link to the Red Condor Collective Linktree in the description of this video. Check that out. There's going to be information there about like material support, ways to get involved, probably anything else. Any other ways you can tell people to get and stay connected to you?
Yeah, I would say, you know, just like you said, follow Red Condor, but also as Red Condor, we don't just tell people to rock with us. We want people to really tap into to what is going on in Colombia, because there's so many organizations on the ground, and Red Condor is about supporting those organizations. So go straight to that too. You know what I mean? Like an organization, La Directa. Check out La Directa, right? Check out La Oreja Roja. There's pages and organizations in Colombia you can check out. And if you go to Red Condor, it might help you find those groups, right? But we're not about, you know, centralizing everything to ourselves. We're about the people, about what's happening on the ground, the front line. So make sure you're tapped in with that. And there's tons of social media accounts right now that you can follow and see footage on the ground, right? If you look up Primera Línea Colombia, Primera Línea, almost anything on Instagram right now, there's a bunch of accounts that are being run by people on the front lines, and you can see it directly, right? And like, I guess one other thing I would say is, like, you know, I try to make a point to not share these graphic images of bodies, right? I don't want to traumatize people, right? And I don't think it's the best way, me personally, how I want to move. But people need to know, like, and it's hard to confront that without showing you to a degree, and like graphics and stuff help people with that, you know what I mean? But like, people really should try to understand the scale and the intensity of the violence going on right now against social leaders, and then understand the role of the US government, right? And how us here in the States, or anyone that's listening that maybe lives in the global north, how all of our countries are involved. So like, be active locally and support what's going on in Colombia, to start in your community. And you have the power to do it.
Cool. All right, Eric.
Yes.
Thanks so much, man.
Love you,
hopefully
bro.
Hopefully I'll see you somewhere that's not in Japan. I'd love to see you in Japan again.
I would love that too.
I'm sure we'll cross paths now that shows are. I'll be out in the Midwest soon, so hopefully we'll see you then. This video will remain on the channel, so please share it. Again, teach one. Each one teach one is a phrase I heard recently. So help put out this information, and hopefully we'll see some next time we talk. Hopefully we'll have an improved situation in Colombia to talk about.
Yes, y before I go, que viva la minga indígena, que viva el paro nacional, el paro no para. Let's keep it going, y'all. Thank you to all the frontliners, all the medics, all the artists, everyone cooking food. We love you. Estamos juntos. Estamos con ustedes en Colombia. Aunque estamos lejos, no somos indiferentes, ¿no? Estamos con ustedes. Sentimos el dolor en nuestras almas cuando nos están matando, ¿no? Lo sentimos aquí desde lejos y estamos juntos. So, let's keep on fighting, yo. Que viva el paro nacional.